"A duchess may purchase art," Sir Alistair said. "She should not pretend that scraping paint makes her an expert." Laughter moved through the royal gallery. Celeste Arden was removed from the inspection table and placed beside the frame makers, while Duke Gideon unveiled the masterpiece he had purchased for the nation. Heat from the new lamps touched the painting. A red line appeared beneath the saint's eye. Then another. The portrait began to bleed. Celeste stepped forwards. "That paint is fresh." Sir Alistair ordered the lamps extinguished. Gideon looked at the crimson color running across the ancient face. Celeste touched one drop with a clean cloth. "This is not a 17th century masterpiece. It is a recent copy beneath old varnish." Guards opened her restoration case. Inside lay the forbidden pigment used to create the false painting. An hour earlier, the royal gallery had been crowded with ministers, collectors, and critics eager to praise a work most of them had never examined. The painting was called The Penitent Saint. It had disappeared from a Spanish monastery nearly 80 years before and was believed lost. Gideon Hartwell, Duke of Street, Aldwyn, had purchased it for an extraordinary sum and announced that he would donate it to the nation. Newspapers had described the acquisition as an act of public generosity. Sir Alistair Fenwick, director of the Royal Gallery, had called it the greatest artistic discovery of the decade. Celeste had been less certain. She stood beside the inspection table, wearing a dark green gown beneath a plain restoration apron. A magnifying lens hung from a ribbon at her waist. Her gloves carried faint stains from years of varnish, oil, and pigment. Lady Honoria Hartwell noticed them immediately. A duchess should not arrive at a national ceremony looking like a tradesman. Celeste examined the painting's gilded frame. A tradesman made the frame. I doubt he would consider that an insult. Honoria looked towards her brother. Gideon was speaking with foreign collectors near the entrance. He had invited Celeste because she had previously identified careless repairs in 2 works belonging to his family, but the formal list of inspectors did not include her name. Instead, Sir Alistair had written, "Her Grace, the Dowager Duchess of Locksley, patroness of decorative restoration." Celeste took up the gallery pen. "That description is inaccurate." Sir Alistair placed one hand over the register. "It is courteous. I restore and authenticate paintings. You supervise craftsmen who do so. I perform the examinations myself." Professor Tobias Crane joined them. His lectures on art history filled public halls, though he had never cleaned a damaged canvas. "Her Grace possesses admirable enthusiasm," he said, "but authentication requires scholarship." Celeste looked at the painting. "Scholarship should begin by observing the object." Tobias smiled. "And what has the object told you?" "That the frame has been opened recently." Sir Alistair's expression tightened. The frame was cleaned before presentation. The nails were replaced, not cleaned. Gideon approached in time to hear the last sentence. "Is there a concern?" "I have not yet been allowed close enough to determine that," Celeste said. Alistair gestured towards the assembled guests. "The official inspection was completed yesterday." Professor Crane confirmed the attribution. "From the ownership papers," Celeste said. "From recognized evidence. Ownership papers describe where a painting has supposedly been. They do not determine what is on the canvas." Honoria Sihith. "A duchess should know whether a painting suits a room, not whether its canvas suits the century." Celeste Methar Gazi. "That belief is why collectors pay fortunes for old frames containing new lies." Several frame makers concealed their amusement. Gideon glanced towards the waiting press. "This dispute can continue after the unveiling." The painting should be examined before it is presented as genuine. Sir Alistair assures me that it has been. You invited me for my judgment. I invited you as a respected patron. Celeste understood. He wanted her presence, not her expertise. Sir Alistair ordered an attendant to move her chair beside the craftsman. Celeste did not resist. She crossed the room and stood beside Matthew Rowe, the gallery's senior frame-maker. He kept his eyes on the floor. "Did your workshop open that frame?" she asked quietly. Matthew hesitated. "We were instructed not to discuss it." "Was it opened?" "Yes." "When?" "3 nights ago." "By whom?" "Men from Sir Alistair's private conservation room." Celeste looked towards the painting. "And the original nails?" "Removed." "Do you still have them?" Matthew said nothing. That silence was enough. The unveiling began. Gideon addressed the gallery from beneath a wall of lamps recently installed to improve public viewing. The nation should not depend upon private fortunes to preserve its artistic history, he said. This work belongs where every citizen may see it. The audience applauded. Celeste watched the canvas rather than the Duke. When the velvet curtain was drawn aside, the penitent saint appeared beneath the bright lamps. The composition was convincing. The face was finely painted. The folds of the robe followed the style of the claimed period. The varnish possessed the yellow-brown surface collectors associated with age. But the cracks were wrong. Natural cracks followed changes in the paint and canvas beneath them. These sat upon the surface like lines drawn after the work was completed. Then the heat reached the face. A red line formed beneath the saint's eye. One guest gasped. The line lengthened across the cheek. A second drop emerged near the mouth. The painted saint appeared to weep blood. Sir Alistair called for the lamps to be extinguished. Celeste was already moving. She reached the canvas before the attendants and held a clean cloth beneath the running color. The pigment transferred immediately. "That paint is fresh." Professor Tobias pushed forwards. "The heat has disturbed an old restoration. No old pigment behaves like this beneath aged varnish." She lifted the cloth towards Gideon. The color was too bright and too soft. Celeste leaned closer to the lower corner of the canvas. The varnish smelled of resin that had not fully cured. This work was painted recently, then covered with old varnish taken from another canvas. Alistair seized the cloth. "You touched a national treasure without authority. I prevented the pigment from staining the frame. You damaged the surface." The surface was already melting. Gideon stared at the red trail across the saint's face. "Can you prove it is a copy?" "Allow me to examine the weave, the underdrawing and the pigments." "No further examination," Alistair said. "Not after this interference." He turned towards the guards. "Search her equipment." Celeste faced him. "On what grounds?" "You approached the painting with chemicals and immediately declared it false, because it revealed itself." The guards placed her restoration case on the central table. Inside were brushes, cloths, glass bottles, a palette knife, and notebooks. Then one guard removed a tin box Celeste had never seen. Sir Alistair opened it. Inside lay a brilliant red pigment, identical to the color running from the painting. A second object followed. A toothed instrument used to create artificial cracks in fresh varnish. Professor Tobias stepped back. "My God!" An invoice was found beneath the tools. It recorded the purchase of a blank canvas matching the dimensions of the penitent saint. The buyer's name was Celeste Arden. Alistair faced the audience. The Duchess introduced fresh pigment into the gallery. She damaged the painting, then pronounced it false so she might receive the national restoration contract. Celeste examined the invoice. The supplier, named here, closed 3 years ago. A convenient claim. The pigment is stored in tin. My workshop uses amber glass because metal contaminates color. Alistair looked towards Gideon. She must be detained before more evidence disappears. Gideon's face had hardened. Celeste expected him to question the perfect timing of the discovery. Instead, he ordered the guards to escort her to the conservation room. She looked at him. You trusted the price when you purchased the painting. Now you trust the accusation because it protects the purchase. I am protecting the investigation. No, you are protecting yourself from learning how much you paid for a lie. The conservation room was small, windowless, and heavy with the smell of spirits. Celeste spent less than 10 minutes examining the planted pigment. Copper fragments glittered beneath the powder. Her own grinding stones were white marble. They could not have produced those fragments. The artificial cracking tool bore a maker's stamp from the gallery workshop. The invoice used an old form of her legal name that had not appeared on Locksley accounts since her husband's death. When Gideon entered, she arranged the evidence in a straight line. The pigment was ground in a copper bowl. Mine never is. She showed him the stamp. This tool belongs to a workshop contracted by Sir Alistair. Then the invoice. And whoever forged this copied my name from a document at least 4 years old. Gideon read it carefully. Why would Alistair risk planting evidence in front of so many witnesses? Because your reputation protects him. If the painting is genuine, you are a generous patron. If it is false, you are a duke who spent a fortune without verifying what he bought. His expression tightened. You take satisfaction in that possibility. No. I take no satisfaction in fraud committed against the public. He looked towards the locked door. If this becomes known before we understand its extent, the gallery may collapse. A forgery, hidden to preserve confidence, remains a forgery. You speak as though exposure has no consequences. It has consequences for the people responsible, and for every donor, employee, and institution connected to this place. Celeste gathered the tools. Then investigate quickly. Gideon ordered her release under his supervision. Sir Alistair objected, but the physical evidence was no longer strong enough to justify detention. Celeste returned to the gallery after midnight. Most of the guests had left. The penitent saint remained beneath a protective cloth. Matthew waited beside the frame. Without speaking, he placed 3 old nails in Celeste's hand. These came from the original frame, he said. She compared them with the new nails holding the canvas. The old metal carried fibers of darker fabric. The present canvas was pale. This frame once held another painting. Matthew nodded. Celeste examined the works hanging nearby. The first had modern nails. The second had a canvas cut too narrowly for its frame. The third carried the same yellow varnish as the penitent saint. Under angled lamplight, she saw a tiny curved mark beneath the painted background. A half-moon. Gideon leaned closer. What is it? Not a signature. A young woman spoke from behind them. It is mine. They turned. Iris Bell stood in the doorway, pale and shaking. I painted that copy, she said, and 7 others in this room. Before Celeste could question her, footsteps sounded in the corridor. Iris seized a lamp. Sir Alistair keeps the originals behind the frame warehouse. He is moving them tonight. She led them through a narrow service passage. Matthew unlocked a door concealed behind stacked moldings. Beyond it lay a room filled with unfinished copies, empty antique frames, and rolled canvases prepared for transport. At the far end, workers were loading wooden crates onto a freight cart. One crate bore the seal of the national auction scheduled for the following morning. Another was marked, "Decorative Frames Export." Celeste touched the side of it. The weight inside shifted like rolled canvas. Then the outer warehouse doors slammed shut. Sir Alister's voice came from the darkness. "You should have accepted the humiliation, Duchess." Locks turned behind them. Beyond the barred windows, the freight cart carrying the stolen masterpieces began moving towards the river. The freight cart rolled towards the river. Inside the locked conservation warehouse, Celeste pressed both hands against the barred window and watched the crates disappear beneath the archway. "How long before they reach the docks?" Gideon asked. Matthew answered first. 20 minutes, perhaps less." Iris looked towards the rear wall. "There is another exit." Sir Alister's voice came through the door. There was. A heavy bolt slid into place. Celeste turned from the window and studied the room. Rows of frames leaned against the walls. Rolled canvases filled wooden racks. Bottles of varnish, pigment, and solvents covered the workbenches. Alister had not merely locked them inside, he had placed them in a room containing enough flammable material to destroy every remaining trace of his operation. The smell reached her before she saw the liquid spreading beneath the door. Lamp oil. Gideon moved towards it. "He means to burn the evidence." "He means to burn us with it," Iris said. A flame appeared beneath the threshold. Celeste seized a woolen packing cloth and stamped it down before the fire could spread. "Move the varnish away from the door." Matthew and Gideon dragged the nearest shelves back. Smoke began to gather against the ceiling. Iris pointed towards an old lifting frame used to suspend large paintings. "The rope passes through the floor above." Celeste examined it. The pulley disappeared into a narrow shaft. "Where does it lead?" "To the upper framing gallery," Matthew said. "But the trapdoor was sealed years ago." "Wooden seal?" "Iron latch." Celeste took up a framing hammer. "Then we do not open the latch. We remove the door around it." They pulled the lifting frame beneath the ceiling shaft. Gideon climbed first, but Celeste stopped him. "You are heavier. If the rope has rotted, it will fail." He looked at the smoke thickening behind them. "This is not the time to protect me. I am protecting the only route out." Iris climbed the frame. Celeste passed her the hammer and a narrow chisel. The first strike loosened plaster. The second exposed timber. Smoke reached the upper beams. Gideon soaked another packing cloth and held it over Iris's mouth while she worked. A section of wood finally split. Cold air entered through the opening. Iris pushed through and disappeared above them. A moment later, the upper latch released. The trapdoor swung open. They climbed into the framing gallery as flames spread through the lower room. Matthew reached the corridor first. "The auction courtyard is below." Celeste looked towards the river-facing windows. The freight cart had not yet crossed the outer gate. "Gideon, use your title." He understood. He opened the gallery doors and shouted down into the courtyard. "Stop that cart in the name of the crown." The drivers did not slow. Two guards near the auction entrance hesitated. Sir Alister appeared below them. "The Duke is acting under the influence of a woman accused of forgery. Continue." Celeste seized an empty frame and pushed it from the upper railing. It crashed onto the stones directly before the horses. They reared. The cart stopped. Gideon descended the stairs 2 at a time. "Open the crates." Alister placed himself between the guards and the cart. "You have no authority to interrupt a national shipment." Gideon looked at the gallery seal upon the nearest crate. "I financed half this institution. You do not control it. No, but I control whether my name protects you. He ordered the guards again. This time, they obeyed. The first crate contained rolled canvases wrapped in sailcloth. Matthew unrolled the uppermost work. Even beneath the poor courtyard light, Celeste recognized the original penitent saint. The pigments were stable. The craquelure followed the canvas beneath it. The lower edge carried old repair stitching recorded in the monastery archives. Gideon looked towards Alistair. You sold me the copy. Alistair did not deny it. He turned and fled through the auction hall. By morning, the royal gallery had transformed into a courtroom without judges. Collectors arrived for the patriotic art auction and found guards posted at every entrance. The stolen originals stood beneath protective cloths. The suspected copies remained in their frames. Sir Alistair had not been found. Professor Tobias urged Gideon to cancel the auction. If this becomes public, every acquisition in the gallery will be questioned. Good, Celeste said. Tobias looked at her sharply. You would destroy confidence in a national institution. No. The institution destroyed confidence when it replaced examination with prestige. Honoria approached Gideon. The newspapers are already outside. Say the shipment was an administrative error. Celeste waited. Only hours earlier, Gideon might have agreed. He looked towards the 3 paintings brought from his private collection. Each had been praised by critics. Each had cost a fortune. Examine mine first, he said. Honoria stared at him. Absolutely not. If they are false, I will not ask the public to accept scrutiny. I refuse for myself. The auction hall filled. Bankers, diplomats, and collectors took their seats while guards closed the doors. Gideon stood at the front. The auction will proceed only as an examination, he announced. No work will be sold until its identity has been established. A murmur moved through the room. Celeste approached the first painting. It was the copy of the penitent saint. Iris stood beside her. With a fine blade, Celeste lifted a fragment of varnish from an already damaged edge. Beneath it, the red pigment remained soft. She placed the fragment beside a sample from the original recovered from the crate. The supposed 17th century paint contains a modern binding oil. The original does not. Matthew displayed the old frame nails and the fibers attached to them. The frame was opened. The original canvas was removed. The copy was inserted. Iris turned the painting towards the light. At Celeste's instruction, she indicated a dark section near the saint's robe. A conservator applied a narrow beam. The half-moon mark appeared beneath the upper layer. I placed that symbol beneath every study copy I painted, Iris said. I was told they would never be sold as originals. Professor Tobias rose. This testimony comes from the admitted maker of forged paintings. I copied paintings, Iris replied. Sir Alistair forged their identities. Celeste moved to Gideon's collection. The first canvas proved genuine. The second carried the half-moon mark. The third had modern machine-woven cloth beneath antique varnish. 2 of Gideon's celebrated masterpieces were false. Whispers swept the hall. A collector laughed openly. Gideon did not react. He stepped beside Celeste. I purchased reputation instead of proof, he said. The Duchess warned me, and I allowed this gallery to shame her because admitting doubt would expose my own vanity. The laughter stopped. I authorized her detention. That decision was mine. Celeste looked at him. He had not asked her to soften the admission, nor had he described himself as another victim of Alistair. The doors at the rear opened. 2 officers entered with Sir Alistair between them. He had been found attempting to board a river vessel using false export papers. The documents recovered from him included shipping schedules, private buyers, and payments to gallery officials. Alistair saw the original paintings displayed beside the copies. His composure failed. "You have ruined the gallery," he told Celeste. She answered without raising her voice. "No, I removed the false paintings from its walls." The investigation lasted 3 months. Alistair was charged with fraud, theft of national property, falsification of provenance, and coercion of artists. Professor Tobias lost his advisory post after admitting that he had authenticated works without examining their materials. Honoria resigned from the honorary council. The Royal Gallery survived, but not unchanged. Celeste refused the position of director when it was offered to her. "I will not replace one unquestioned authority with another." Instead, she designed a public record system for every national artwork. Each entry included ownership history, canvas measurements, frame alterations, pigment tests, restoration reports, and the names of every craftsperson involved. Matthew's measurements became evidence rather than workshop trivia. Iris's copies were catalogued under her own name. They were displayed as studies, not hidden as embarrassments. Every future authentication required agreement from an art historian, a materials conservator, and a practicing craftsperson. No title or price could substitute for examination. Months later, Gideon arrived at Locksley carrying a small portrait beneath plain cloth. He brought no advisors, no certificate, no auction catalogue. Celeste received him in her restoration room. The sleeves of her dark blue gown were covered by a working apron. Morning light crossed the long table. Gideon placed the portrait before her. "My family believes this is an early work by Bellori." "And what do you believe?" "That I do not know." She removed the cloth. It showed a woman seated beside a garden window. The painting was modest and unsigned. "Do you wish me to tell you whether it is genuine?" Celeste asked. Gideon shook his head. "I wish you to tell me what the evidence says." She examined the frame. "And if the evidence disappoints you?" "Then I shall be disappointed by the painting, not offended by the truth." Celeste looked at him for a moment. The man who had once purchased certainty now stood before her, asking for investigation. She set the portrait upon the easel. "You may stay." Gideon removed his coat. "Where should I stand?" "Beside the window. Do not touch anything." He obeyed. Celeste angled the painting towards the light. Beneath the dark varnish, a faint second figure appeared beside the seated woman. Gideon leaned forwards, then stopped himself before crossing the marked line around her work table. "What do you see?" "A story someone painted over." "Can it be recovered?" "Perhaps." He waited. He did not tell her what he hoped the answer would be. He did not mention the name attached to the frame or the amount his family had once paid. Celeste began recording the canvas measurements. Gideon watched in silence. For the first time, the Duke stood inside a restoration workshop, not as a patron expecting certainty, but as a student willing to have his assumptions removed layer by layer. Celeste did not promise that the portrait was valuable. She promised only that the truth would be visible when the evidence allowed it. This time, that was enough for him.